Welcome everyone to the Remodeling and New Home Expo. My name is Leslie Hart-Davidson. It is a pleasure to be with you here tonight. I am a residential interior designer and have the coolest job in the world. I get to help you live better in your home through great interior design. And this evening, I'm happy to be talking to you about Taste of Her Own Medicine, because a few years ago, I had my own kitchen remodel and learned quite a few things about it. Now, as a residential interior designer, I've been working with clients for the last 2 decades, and I've helped them go through lots of remodels, and I could always sympathize with them about the project that they were doing and how challenging it was to live through a remodel, but I could never really empathize with them until I did it to myself. So I learned 4 very important lessons about remodeling during that experience. So that's why I created this seminar, Taste of Her Own Medicine. But first, who am I and why do I get to stand here tonight and talk to you about this? I would like to introduce you to Jim and Mary Hart in all of their 1960s Mad Men era glory. These are my folks, and they were real estate flippers in the 1970s before it was a thing. So I grew up in and around the construction business and helped my mom carry her buckets of wallpaper paste, and I helped my dad with all of his tools, and he taught me everything that he knew. So I spent my entire childhood being in and around the building and remodeling process, and I decided later that design is absolutely what I wanted to do. So even though I'm from Michigan, but it's Michigan State, not the blue one, no. I got my degree in interior design from Bowling Green State University, and then in 2001 I started my own company, HDD Studios. And in addition to that, I'm a member and presenter for the National Kitchen and Bath Association, and I've had the great pleasure of being a speaker at all the kitchen and bath industry shows. So I get to do that every year. In my journey of remodeling and taking care of clients and helping them with their homes, I learned quite a few things. And it was such a cathartic experience in working with all of those clients that I needed to write a book about it so that I could help other people. So my very first book is called Remodeling Your House Without Killing Your Spouse, because homicide is not a thing during home improvement. I've had so many clients, so in that 10 years before I wrote my first book, I had clients who would divorce in the middle of projects, others who would actively fight in front of me, and I had to stop and say, guys, I'm more expensive than a marriage counselor, so let's get some things rolling here and figure it out. But after that happened multiple times, I realized that all these clients were making similar mistakes in the way that they approached the project, or thinking that it was the space that was the problem when it was actually the person with them in the space that was the problem. So being able to write this book and come up with 4 excellent ideas to have a great experience and to get people educated about the process first made it so much easier. So I will actually give a lot of my clients this book to do before we do a big project. Now my second book is called It's Not Your Room, It's You, which is design therapy. I noticed with a lot of other clients after I wrote my first book that there were a tremendous amount of putter offers. So these were folks who wouldn't take action with their space. So I identified several types of putter offers and then came up with some great ways to combat that. So for example, if you have ever watched hours and hours of HGTV and thought, well, I just don't know what I'm gonna do, and just too many different decisions, so I'm just not gonna make any decision at all. That's a very specific kind of putter offer. So I have ways to deal with that. My third book is called Food is Love, and it is my pandemic baby. It's very important that I had an opportunity after caring for my brother. So he was sick in 2017, and my parents are gone. I had the pleasure of taking care of him. So each week I would drive from Michigan to Ohio to take care of him on his journey that lasted about 5 months before he succumbed to cancer. During that time, I was able to help him process it, and I also had the opportunity to process through writing. It's one of my favorite things to do. So there are 5 different stories that I would write about our childhood and about what was happening in his cancer journey at that time. And even though I had started writing Food is Love years before, it wasn't until I took care of my brother that I was able to incorporate all of our memories of food and our family growing up, since we'd lost so many of them already. I took all of those cherished family memories, combined them into chapters with those stories about my brother, and also added a healthy dose of kitchen design to make the book as useful as possible for as many people as possible, because food is love no matter what you're making. Any act of cooking is an act of love. My upcoming 4th book is a little like Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. So you know how he wrote about all of his experience in the restaurant industry? Well, The Reveal is my 4th book, and it's hilarious, head-shaking, and heartfelt stories from a professional interior designer. Because I've been doing this a lot of years, and I've got some tea to spill. Many, many fascinating stories, and they are either like, oh my goodness, did that really happen? Or, whoa, or, oh, that's sweet. The lessons from all of those client interactions as well. There are lots of really important ideas that are going to come up, and I want you to have access to that when I'm done talking. So if you scan this QR code, and I have one up here as well afterwards if you want to come say hi, in that QR code there are free digital downloads to a lot of the guides that I'll be referring to and some of the great information that I have available. So let's get back to Taste of Her Own Medicine. Now, with my own project, I had very specific goals in mind. And whenever I'm working with kitchen remodeling or new build and kitchen clients, I want to make sure that they know exactly why they are doing this remodel. So for some of them, it's purely just, I need to update. And for others, it's I'm completely changing how I'm cooking in the space or how I'm using it. And for some others, it's just, I need a pretty kitchen. And those are all fine reasons, but I also want to define specifically what it is in the goals of why we're going to all this trouble and all this expense, because it's an investment. I want to make sure that you're doing it right. So my own specific goals for my kitchen remodel: first, to purge, because I'd been in the house for 10-ish years at that time, and had moved and been with my husband for 15, 20 years before that. So we just kept moving all the stuff and shoving it in the cabinets and packing it up and moving it and shoving it in the cabinets. But I know that this home is my forever home. So I want to make sure to do it right, because I don't want to put junk back in my beautiful new cabinets, right? The second was to plan 100 years out. Now, I have the tremendous honor of owning a house that was built right around the Civil War. My goal is to be a steward of that space and not just like flip it. So this isn't something that I'm going to leave in 5 years. I'm going to be around forever, and I want to make sure that the next generations can experience and enjoy the kitchen as much as I do. And the third was to improve traffic pattern and flow, because even though it was a very nice kitchen and it seemed big enough, it was always like butt bumping as I was moving around the space, so I needed to fix that. Let me show you what the kitchen looked like before. So again, old farmhouse. Luckily I had the big vaulted ceiling, and it's a giant space with the dining room on the other side. So we had sort of the U shape there with lots of upper cabinetry. Love my windows, wanted to keep that feature. So we have the sink over the windows, and then there's a little island space that I had stools tucked under that we would use all the time. There's a prep sink in there. Now that table was important to me because it came from the MSU library. So I'm from Michigan, hello, and with the Spartan, not the blue. And it's important, I know, because I was born in Ohio. Side note, my brother-in-law, who was from Ohio originally, married a woman from Michigan, but she celebrates the blue and not the green. His family almost disowned him. Okay, so back to the kitchen. So the table is important because it came from the Michigan State Library in the 1940s. And it had a little prep sink in it. And then that little piece that's at the bottom of the screen there is a vintage candy counter from a 5 and dime. And that visually separated the space from the kitchen and then the little dining area, even though it's one giant vaulted space, okay? And here it is from the other angle. So if you were sort of standing on the corner there looking out, so you can see the front of that candy counter. And if you can imagine, the black and white tiles, those are 1 foot tiles. So you see there's not a lot of space in between the triangle, so the fridge and the sink and the stove. Not a lot of space there. And here's what would happen in that space. So this is husband and a bunch of other friends hanging around the table and like kicking back, right? So where do I access to get things out of the oven? A little challenging, right? So I have to like, get out of the way, to get him to be able to move so that I can pull things out of the oven. And this would happen all the time. Now, I love to cook, I love to entertain, I love having people in my space, but I don't want to hurt myself as I'm trying to take things out of the oven, right? Now, the other thing about the kitchen is that it was 1990s, the last time it was updated, and the shaker style, the maple wood. but it had started to warp. And especially in the picture on the right there, that's above the stove, so all the steam, right? It warped all of that. The number of hours of therapy from scrubbing that tile grout, yeah, because the whole countertop was tile, so I would just, if I was ever frustrated, but it had started to come apart. And then the photo on the right there is the drawer. So those were nailed and stapled together. It wasn't dovetail joined, so they were starting to fall apart, and I knew that it was time. It was also time to make a bigger investment in the half bath that was right off of the kitchen. And the reason why I have Little House on the Prairie up there is because I referred to that half bath as the Little House one, because it was only usable for 10 months a year. As in Michigan, when it got below like 20 degrees, the bathroom didn't work. It would just freeze up because it had very little insulation. I thought, okay, so structurally, I want to make sure that I have a fully functioning bathroom for all of my guests every time they come over. The other issue with an old house, especially in that giant kitchen, 15 feet long, right? So you could enter the room on one side and then walk across it, and this is what would happen. Then you come back up. There was a giant dip in the entire floor because it was 150 years old. So it was sagging just like we all do, right? So there are 4 specific lessons that I wanted to teach you from my own kitchen remodel that I've learned. And again, this is an opportunity as I work with my kitchen design clients over the years. I could always sympathize, but I could not empathize about the process. I'm in full empathy mode and want to make sure that you have an opportunity to do this as well. Lesson number 1, plan for disruption. Your life is gonna get so messy. This is just the stuff I pulled out of the upper cabinetry as we began this process. There's so many things, and it was almost like an archaeological expedition. It's like, I last saw this in 1994 when we got married, right? It's amazing the kind of stuff that you can find there. Like, the little purple cup, my daughter used that 15 years ago. I think I can get rid of it now, it's fine. So take a guess how many loads I took to Goodwill, because that's just the upper cabinetry. 5 trips in my CRV, fully packed. And I thought about all of this strategically. So as I was packing things up, because I had planned out, because my brain just works this way, and Dad, outside of being the real estate flipper, was a tool and die guy, so he measured like in micrometers. And I, in designing my new kitchen, made sure that every square inch of every cabinet had a purpose and a space, and I knew exactly what I was putting in there. I measured my pots and pans. Like, okay, that'll fit in this drawer. So I wanted to be very careful about what was going back in there, and I was ruthless with the purging, and it was okay. The other part of the disruption is that you no longer have a kitchen to cook in. So this photo is me holding yogurt, standing in my living room, looking at what is about to be carnage. When you are planning a kitchen remodel, what's important is you have a place to put everything else. So not only do you have all the stuff that came out of the kitchen that you have to put in another room, which then disrupts the next room. It's like a domino effect, right? But then you got to figure out, where am I going to cook? Where is the fridge going? Am I doing dishes in the bathtub? I mean, how is that going to work? Crock pots and disposables are really the answer for that. But luckily, on my property with the 150-year-old farmhouse, I have a 17-step commute to work where my studio is on the same property right next door. Yes. And luckily, it's part of why I bought that house. And luckily, in that studio, there was a nice-sized kitchen that had the sink and a fridge, but not a lot of other stuff in there. But at least I had that. So I set up some cabinetry and only brought over what I absolutely knew I would need. Because I didn't want to take like everything to my studio, because that would be super disruptive and I wouldn't be able to do my design work there. But I thought about it strategically, like you would think about packing for a trip. So when you go on vacation for a week, 10 days, you don't take your entire wardrobe, right? You only take what you need each day for that process. And that's how I thought about this. So instead of taking everything, I said, okay, what am I going to need for the next, it's actually 3 months that I was out the kitchen. Like, how can I do this? So the things that I used most often, so I knew I'd use the toaster every morning. I had my knife block out there so I could cut. Cutting board is right next to there. So that worked fine on that surface. And then I also had my new range delivered to the studio so I could at least cook in there, and I had a gas line already in there. So that worked perfectly. But I thought hard about what is it that I need in order to survive. Everything else, if I knew that it was like something for Christmas, because I did this in the summer, if it was a holiday item or something else, it went in a box in the basement. And there are other things that I kept sort of close by in case I needed it, and those were a little bit easier to grab, like at the front of the basement rather than the, okay, I will deal with you later. 3 of the boxes that I took down the basement that I did not purge but thought, maybe I'll keep it, ended up not ever using it and not needing it, and realized, oh, that can go too, thank you very much. But planning that out ahead of time is super important. Now, my husband and my kid were pretty good sports about this. It was a little bit easier because it was summer. We ate on the patio a lot, we grilled a lot, but it was disruptive not having our normal things. So my husband offered me this quote as I was running the seminar. So it's kind of like at the end of Wizard of Oz, where I wake up and I'm in a different place and there's some familiar faces staring back at me. Fridge is there, just slightly smaller than I remember, and stove is there, looking and working much better than before. But there's one face left out, and I miss you most of all, dishwasher. Did not have a dishwasher in the studio, and that comment to me is hilarious because I'm the one who did all the dishes. Yes. Lesson number 2, and a taste of her own medicine to help you get through a kitchen remodel better. Structure trumps aesthetics. You absolutely have to make sure that there's a contingency plan and that there's money set aside for any of the structural things before you think about the beautiful countertop that you really, really want. Now, I remember watching This Old House, and you know who that guy is? That's Bob Vila. Bob Vila, the OG dude from This Old House. And my dad and I were watching this program in the 70s, and there was a young couple very excited about their own kitchen remodel, and she had spent a great deal of time making those selections about the color of the countertop and the beautiful cabinetry and the new appliances, everything awesome. But Bob had said, okay, just keep in mind, Norm might find something as we're looking around. Just need you to keep some money back for that. But no, she was just insistent. She wanted all the pretty things. So when Bob came to her to say, look, Norm said the footing is actually pretty bad. We're gonna need to jack that up and fix it. So we're gonna need some of that budget to do that. And she was furious. She's like, but I want my countertops. And he said, lady, do you want your house to sink to the ground? Do you want it to fall in? Or do you want your pretty countertops? She's like, oh, fine. So it's important that structure is taken into consideration. While I love HGTV, and I'm grateful to it because I have a job as a result of the popularity of Home and Garden television, I have one rule as I'm watching it. I'm not allowed to hold the remote in my hand because I will end up flinging it at the TV, because shows like The Property Brothers do a tremendous disservice to people who are watching it, because they think, oh, sure, that's just a tiny little budget. I can remodel my entire kitchen for $10,000 and add a zero. That is not how that works. And there's always something that they gotta find. Actually, you can't just open up this wall. You have to put a $15,000 beam in there. If you work with a contractor who knows what they're doing, you can catch all those things ahead of time. It does not have to be manufactured drama. So knowing the structural things ahead of time is super important. Speaking of structural things, this is the giant pit. So when all the excavation and things started for my own kitchen, the contractor, Matt, called me over from my studio. He was like, come on over and take a look at what we found here. Now that part of the kitchen just had a crawl space underneath it. So he's like, take a look at everything, don't you? Isn't it cool? Let's look at your house. And I'm down there like, is there like a woman in a pit? Do I need to offer her lotion or something? He's like, no, it's okay. So this is what my kitchen looked like for a solid month. Just the giant open space there, because there was a significant amount of gap, and the boards ended up being sistered and not spanning the entire length. So that is the entire reason why if you walked across it, you did that and then came back up. So they were able to fix every bit of that. And there's Matt with the level, making sure that everything is perfect. So it is delightful to not have everything scooped down the center. And I know that for the next 100 years, which was one of my goals, it's gonna be perfect. We took that opportunity as well to upgrade all of the plumbing, because there was some of the original 100-year-old cast iron pipe underneath there that would have broken in the meantime. So this is a perfect opportunity to upgrade to PEX for all the plumbing, to reroute the HVAC to make it more efficient. So much warmer in there now. Just made a huge difference. Lesson 3 in Taste of Her Own Medicine. You gotta combat blindness. Now, what does that mean? So in my book, Food is Love, I have a significant amount of kitchen design related things, so it's helpful to be able to look at the options for the different types of layouts of kitchens. So that's available for the free digital download that I have up here. But the blindness I'm talking about specifically, so for me as a designer, I can walk into somebody's house and I can say, oh, have you ever considered, like, how about we put this over here? And if we move this wall, then that'll give you a great opportunity for that. It's so hard when you're in your own space and in your own head so much because you've looked at that space exactly like it is for years and years, and you think, oh, this is maybe the only way it could be. And it's not until somebody else gives you an opportunity to say, have you ever considered doing something like that? So remember, one of my biggest issues in the original plan there was the island and how everybody sat around it, and then I'd have to and scoot all around to get something out of the stove, because the boys were always in the way, and it made it really challenging for me to be able to prepare food and to entertain. So my original thought was, okay, let's turn the island the other direction. That would at least give me a few more feet on each side, so I could pull things out of the oven without having to worry about dropping them or dropping it on something else, and it would just make the space a little bit bigger. But luckily, I have a surly teenager at home, and she has a lot of good ideas. So here's what she said. Mother, have you ever considered just moving this candy counter? It was affixed to the floor, and remember, it was the barrier in between the kitchen area, and then on the other side was the dining space. And she said, just move it. I'm like, oh, I had been blind to the idea because I had stared at it for so long. I'm like, thank you, surly teen. And she said, just move it to this wall. Now, underneath the little logo that I made there is a mantle, but that is not an operational fireplace. That is my mama's mantle. So when she passed away, I took her furniture and the things that were important to me, and that mantle she had thrifted 40 years ago. So I pulled it off the wall and I brought it home, and that was the longest wall that made sense where it could go. So that's just a cute little decorative piece that's in front of it. And she said, just move that to the other side. I'm like, oh, and she said, the candy counter will fit there. And then guess what? You have all the space available, and you can pull the island forward, and you don't have to scoot around Dad anymore. I'm like, winner. That is awesome. Lesson 4, in A Taste of Her Own Medicine. You gotta roll with it. In my book, Remodeling Your House Without Killing Your Spouse, remember, homicide is not a thing during home improvement, I talk about the fact that things will go wrong during construction. Wrong either in that something's delayed, something arrives broken, contractor made a mistake, subcontractor doesn't show up, and it delays things. It's gonna happen. I mean, there's no such thing as an absolutely perfect project. Stuff will come up. Now, it depends on how you react to it that makes a difference in how well the project goes. So here's some examples of things that I just had to roll with. Now, the first, so remember the original 12-inch vinyl composition tile? Now, I love the style of that because it is an old farmhouse. But I knew that aesthetically, especially since I opened up the space, thank you, daughter, and moved the counter over, I wanted the opportunity to make the space feel bigger. And even though it's counterintuitive, if you put small things in a large space, it just shrinks the space, so it will make it feel a lot smaller. So I wanted to use 24-inch vinyl composition tiles and then put them on an angle to make the space feel bigger. Guess what doesn't exist? 24-inch vinyl composition tiles. So what did I do? Put 4 together. Boom, 24-inch vinyl composition tiles. That worked beautifully. The second thing, so the finish that I chose in my beautiful new cabinetry was sort of a warm-ish tone that was several tones darker than the brick that was in the space. And it just makes me so happy. I love that stain. But the tower corner there, I wanted it to match my antique china hutch that sits right next to it. So when I originally placed the order for that stain and all the cabinetry, there was a blue paint that was very similar that I wanted to order. And it was discontinued. So I thought, okay, what am I gonna do? Well, I'm gonna get handy. So I ordered that tower naked. So It was unfinished, and that's my business manager, Jen, who is a very talented decorative artist, and she beat up the tower, essentially, just to make it look a little distressed, and then did 5 layers of paint after several glasses of wine and got really creative, and now it looks exactly like the hutch. It's just perfect. Now, one of the ramifications of surly teens saying, Mom, just move the candy counter, is that the candy counter is exactly the same tone as the brick wall that it's going against. And what happens when there's the same against the same? Your eye just goes, and it misses it, right? So I needed to create some contrast. And the way that I did that was to match the top of the candy counter. So I refinished that in the stain that's very similar to the cabinetry. And that way, when it's against the wall, there's that visual contrast. You have that line going across there that really draws your eye to it. It works perfectly, and it looks like it was very intentional. And I also swapped out the hardware on the drawers of the candy counter to look exactly like the ones on the kitchen cabinetry, on the new. Now, another thing that I was really looking forward to when the boys had called me over from the studio, and they said, hey, guess what we found in the pit? And they pulled out this massive board. It's probably 200 years old, and it was like 4.5 inches thick, and then 10 inches wide. And then I thought, oh, that would be perfect because I want to do floating shelves next to the fridge. And when it came time to do those, I had my mason look at that brick wall and then look at the size and the weight of that board. And he said, no, I can't have you put that up there because it's too much weight, it'll pull it down. Like, oh, I was bummed. But that's okay. I still wanted to honor that piece. So I was able to feature it up above the windows with really sturdy brackets. And there's a 2-inch projection on that top trim piece, so it was able to sit there. And I know that it will be secure. So I cut it to size, and it's absolutely perfect. And now it's an opportunity to feature an original well pump that was from the property, and my dad's 1970 rival avocado green crock pot that I ate out of all the time in my childhood. So those are the 4 specific lessons that I learned to be empathetic about during my own kitchen remodel. So plan for disruptions. You need to know where you're going to eat, and also that you need to purge everything, and where you're going to put all the stuff while that is happening. Structure trumps aesthetics. You have to make sure and keep money in for your worst case scenario, and to pay attention to the quality of the items that are going in there so that it can last as long as you're going to be in the home, and hopefully for the next generation as well. Combat blindness. Use your surly teen in order to come up with different ideas and things in your imagination that you hadn't thought of otherwise, and roll with it. Sometimes you just got to say, okay, well, plot twist, what else can we do here? Now, let me show you the after pictures. I know you've been waiting for those. And if you have questions for me, just say, hey, Leslie, what is this all about? So here's the original. This is what I started with the teeny tiny little island there, candy counter blocking the way up front, and not a lot of space to work with. And that's what it is today. So moving that candy counter out of the way made a huge difference. So I was able to pull the island back 6 feet, and I kid you not, the first day that I walked into that kitchen, I went between the sink and the island where there was the biggest amount of trouble where my husband was, and did the whole like, hills are alive. I was able to dance in the space because there was so much. Here it is from the other direction, so you can see the candy counter against the brick wall there. And instead of having the dining space on the other side of that counter, I created Starbucks. So it's room for 4 there, and just a really nice comfy seating area. And from that spot, I can have guests sit, and I can still chat with them. Now remember the blue cabinet that I had to order naked? See how nice it is having the blue in the corner there that matches the blue of the antique dish cabinet? That worked beautifully. And because the island moved back so much, I was able to add really nice cushy chairs to sit in instead of just the IKEA stools that were shoved underneath there originally. That made a huge difference. And then being able to add some decor that would not only honor the memories that I have with my dad and that crock pot and the well pump, but I found those vintage signs. Those are grocery store signs that I found in an antique store. So I put Mod Podge over top of them, and that's really nice. So instead of going to Target and getting the sign that says, eat, I have actual grocery signs, which is cool. And then my very sweet, derpy Greyhound Gus is forever memorialized in stained glass. It's awesome. So how much do I love my new kitchen? That much. The day the countertops were installed, I gave it a huge hug. So again, my name is Leslie Hart-Davidson. I'm a residential interior designer from Michigan, sorry. But the green, not the blue, the green. And I'm here today to make sure that you understand taste of her own medicine and those 4 lessons of being able to live better in your own home. So again, if you scan that QR code, I have one right here for you as well. It will lead you to my website and a ton of great digital downloads to be able to help with your own remodel. I also have my 3 books available here. Food is Love, Remodeling Your House Without Killing Your Spouse, and It's Not Your Room, It's You. So if you are interested in looking at those or purchasing, if you have any other questions, come on up and talk to me. I don't bite, I promise. Thanks so much. Have a great evening.